Okay, so hello and welcome. Could you please put a plus in the chat box if you can hear me, if you can see the presentation. Today, we're going to have a live stream that is dedicated to academic writing task 1, and that's the dynamic data, and we'll have a look at an example of describing academic writing task 1. It looks like I cannot see the chat box right now, so I'm not sure I've started this live stream. I hope everything is okay. Let me try to change some settings. So just in the meantime, if you can hear me and you can see, if you can see the presentation, please put a plus in the chat box. And there might also be a delay of up to 30 seconds. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I can hear myself. I will turn off the sound. Yes. I still don't see your pluses, but that's probably because there is a delay. Yeah. So anyway, the recording is going on. Okay, Karina, thank you. I can see the first plus. Leonid. Okay, great. So once again, for those who have just joined us, we're going to talk about dynamic data, line graphs, academic writing task 1. The first thing I want to talk about is, well, when you have the task in academic writing task 1, usually it has some, well, some keyword, a noun phrase. For example, the graph below shows, and there's a water consumption or meat consumption, or for example, rates of employment in a certain place over a certain period of time. And here you can see a list of words. Okay, let me just, you can see a list of words. They cover, well, maybe not all tasks, but approximately 90% of all the tasks, especially in dynamic data when there are line graphs. So these words are consumption, production, generation, participation, use or usage, expenditure, spending, degradation, emissions, employment, sales, birth, death, mortality, marriage, exports, imports. So very often, if there's academic writing task 1, then you will get one of these. You'll get one of these words in your task. And the thing is that the whole task 1 is going to be about this topic. Now imagine you have electricity generation. So is there a synonym for electricity? Not really, but well, you can think of some technical synonym or paraphrase for this, but there is no good synonym. For generation, yes, you can say production, but what about, for example, if you have chicken consumption, there is no good synonym for chicken. There is no good synonym for consumption. And so one more way, there are always at least 2 other ways to paraphrase this keyword, even if there are no synonyms, because you cannot write chicken consumption, chicken consumption, chicken consumption throughout your writing task 1. So here are some examples how you can paraphrase that. For example, beef consumption, the consumption of beef, the amount of beef which was consumed. So all these are considered to be paraphrases. So paraphrasing is not limited to synonyms. There are also other ways how you can paraphrase keywords in the task. Or greenhouse gas emissions, the emissions of greenhouse gases, the amount of gases which were emitted. Or football participation, participation in football, the number of boys who participated in football. Well, it depends on the task. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes there are synonyms. For example, there can be, like during our last live stream, we wrote about water consumption, and then here you can say water use, water usage, then the amount of water which was consumed, the amount of water which was used. Yeah, so the consumption of water, the usage of water, and so on. So it means that the number of these keywords just increases. All right. So if you don't know a synonym, sometimes it does not exist, then that's not the end of the world. There are other ways to paraphrase. Now let's look at an example of a task. The chart below shows information about electricity generation in 3 countries from 1990 to 2000. Okay, can I ask you to write in the chat box, try to paraphrase this keyword, electricity generation. So, and you don't need to use synonyms like production. Try to use these like to generate, generation, and electricity, and try to create 2 more. So the first one is electricity generation, and try to create 2 more noun phrases. Okay. So I'll just give you 1 more minute. Okay, Karina, amount. Well, first of all, it should be the amount of, you could say the amount of generated electricity, but it would be much better if you said the amount of electricity which was generated. Yeah. That's one way. But you can also say the amount of generated electricity. That's true. All right, so here are my options. So electricity generation, that's what we have. It's noun 1, noun 2. Now we have the generation of electricity. So there is the, noun 2, preposition, in most cases is going to be of, but not necessarily, and then noun 1. So the generation of electricity. And the third noun phrase is the amount of the amount of electricity, sorry, which was generated. So the formula is going to be like the number, the amount, the percentage, the proportion of this noun 1, electricity, which sometimes it's about people, so it can be who, and then the verb can be in the active or in the passive voice, depending on the meaning. So now this last phrase is, well, it's more desirable for grammar. I mean, you need to use all these 3 phrases to show variety, to show your ability to paraphrase. But the third one is likely to create a complex sentence in your writing. Yeah, so the graph below shows the amount of electricity which was generated in a certain country over a certain period. Oh, we have this. So in 3 nations over a 20-year period commencing in 1990 and culminating in the year of 2000, something like this. So your introduction is already a complex sentence, which is good for your grammatical range score. All right. So let me see what you wrote in the chat box, if there is anything else. Will the stream be recorded? Yes, Anna, I hope it will be recorded if everything goes well. So if there are no technical issues, it means it's going to be on my YouTube channel and it is going to be available. Yeah, 2 previous live streams are saved and everything was fine. So let's also talk about the introduction and how to paraphrase different elements of the introduction, because introduction always consists sorry, not introduction, but the task in academic writing, task 1, consists of several elements. So first, there is like this noun, the graph, the bar chart, the pie chart, the process, the map, whatever. Below, we don't need it. It's not below anymore when you write your actual description. So just forget about it. And then there is a verb like shows, indicates, sometimes, well, gives, sometimes it says information about or data on, not always. And then there is this noun phrase that we discussed, like chicken consumption, cinema attendance, electricity generation. And then there is preposition, a phrase of place, like in Australia, and preposition, phrase of time. For example, between 1990 and 2010. And in order to be able to paraphrase the task brilliantly, you need to know some tricks and life hacks on how to paraphrase, how to kill each element and how to paraphrase each element. Let's start with the first one, the graph. Can you write in the chat box some ways, how can you paraphrase the graph? What are some other ways? Not necessarily, you don't have to use synonyms, but well, maybe you can find one. Let's see. So, you're probably writing something in the chat box. Well, it is possible to say graph chart, but personally, I don't like it. For me, a chart is either a pie chart or a bar chart, although some people paraphrase graph as chart. If it's graph, you can say line graph. You can also say the given line graph shows, or the line graph given shows. But you can also create a complex sentence here by using fronting. So fronting, this is a special construction, an advanced grammar structure. When you use something in the beginning of the sentence, for example, you say, undeniable is the fact that, or indisputable is the fact that, or you could do it like this, given is the line graph which shows, or whatever. So given is the line graph which, so instead of graph, you can also say line graph. And yes, you already start your introduction with a complex sentence, which is good because for band 7 in grammatical range in academic writing task 1, we're not talking about accuracy yet, but in range, more than half of your sentences should be complex. The majority of your sentences should be complex. You shouldn't be using too many simple sentences, and an introduction is often a simple sentence. All right, and then so we have this noun phrase like the graph. My recommendation is to say either the given graph, the graph given, or given is the line graph, which, and then we have this verb, shows. We also need to paraphrase this verb. So in more than 90% of all the tasks, what you can do is you can say, if it shows, you can say it indicates. If it indicates, you can say shows. If it gives, you can say provides. If it provides, you can say gives. If it gives information, you can say provides data. If it provides data, you can say it gives information. Now, there are more advanced verbs that, well, exist. Yeah, there are some more advanced verbs, but you should be careful with them because every day I read from some of my students, I read some really crazy combinations like exhibits, displays, depicts, but there are no pictures. Sometimes it creates some really crazy collocations. So to be on the safe side, these verbs will help you in more than 90% of cases to paraphrase almost any type of task. Okay, Karina, chart and diagram. Well, yeah, some people do. Now I can see some people are watching this live stream. Could you please put thumbs ups? Could you please put likes to this video, because I need to promote my channel too. Thank you in advance. Okay, yeah, I see some some thumbs up appeared. So subject, verb. The next one, well, we have this big noun phrase like chicken consumption. We talked about how to paraphrase that, like chicken consumption, the consumption of chicken, the amount of chicken which was consumed. And then we have this preposition phrase of place. And sometimes it is impossible to paraphrase it, and it's okay. So for example, if it says in Australia, don't paraphrase it like in a country where kangaroos live. There is no need, just leave it. You don't have to paraphrase every word. Or in New Zealand, just leave it as it is. Because some students, when they want to paraphrase Japan, they write in the country of the rising sun. Or if it's England, they say the foggy Albion or something like this. Well, this is not the appropriate place to write such poetry. This is academic writing, so just leave it as it is. And by the way, you cannot change United Kingdom to Great Britain or vice versa, because United Kingdom consists of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So you're making a factual mistake. Maybe examiner will not notice this, but some of them do. Some of them will notice. But if you have something like in a European country, you can say, paraphrase it as in a nation in Europe, or in 5 European countries, you can say in 5 nations in Europe. And now time. So let's have a look at an example. If it's dynamic data, very often you will have something like from 1995 to 2005. Okay. Okay, I actually want to slightly different, but okay. Can you suggest some ways how you can paraphrase this time phrase from 90? So if you have like the graph below shows the consumption of chicken in Australia from 1995 to 2005. How are you going to paraphrase this from 1995 to 2005? Please write this in the chat box. I'll give you some time to write, and then I will tell you my options, how this can be done. You can write it at any time in the chat box, so I will come back between Madina. Yes, you could say, for example, the easiest way here would probably be, say, between 1995 and 2005, all right? But my recommendation would be to do it in a different way. So let's look here. Over a 10-year period, or it could be a decade, over a decade, commencing or beginning or starting in 1995. Now, please pay attention that it's over a period, a, don't forget article. 10-year, it's not years, it's an adjective. 10-year period, like $500 a week contract, it's not dollars, yeah? 14-year-old boy, it's not years. This is a compound adjective. Well, it's actually an attribute, like its syntactic function is attribute, but it's like, let's just call it an adjective. It functions as an adjective here. So 10-year period commencing in 1995. You can say beginning, but commencing is more advanced. And you also have this participial construction. You have a compound adjective. So everything is nice in this kind of paraphrase. All right. During a certain year. No, about years, you don't say during. If you say during, then it's not a year. It's something like during the lesson or during the, well, some kind of a noun that does, but you cannot use it with like months, minutes, hours, years, weeks, and so on. You will say 4 or 5 weeks, for 10 years. You wouldn't say during with this construction. I think it's not the most appropriate way. Well, anyways, what I recommend is this: over a 10-year period commencing in 1995. So, for example, if you have between 1979 and 2004, most candidates will paraphrase it from 1979 to 2004. Now, my recommendation, and what my students do, is that we write over a 25-year period commencing in 1979. All right. Sometimes there can be 2 separate years in 2003 and 2013. Now, they can be, you can just write in 2 separate years of 2003 and 2013, but you can just leave it as it is. In 2014, you can paraphrase as within the year of 2014. And now let's have a look. Now you're masters of paraphrasing introductions. So we have this cinema attendance. Let's try to paraphrase first. Let's try to paraphrase cinema attendance in 2 other ways. Okay, I'll just give you a minute. Okay, now you should be careful here because of prepositions. English prepositions are very difficult. So there will be cinema attendance, attendance at the cinema, and the number of people who attended the cinema. So this is how you paraphrase that. Okay. Now, this is our introduction. And now let's try to paraphrase the whole introduction. So how would we paraphrase the whole introduction? I will also give you a minute. Yes, Medina, the number of people, you don't participate. About cinema, you say attend. Let's use the same because participate and cinema do not collocate. You're not an actor. So then the number of people who attended the cinema instead of participated, and also participate in and not participate something. But thank you for your option, for your variant. Okay, now let's try to paraphrase the introduction. I will also, while you're probably writing, some of you might be writing, I will now write my own. So if I were at an exam, I would write the following introduction. All right, here's my introduction. Given as a line graph, which, so it says, gives information which provides data on cinema attendance, the number of people who attended the cinema in Australia, I will leave it as it is, over a 20-year period commencing in 1990. You can also say and culminating in 2010, but if it's a 20-year period beginning in 1990, it's clear that it will finish in 2010. Okay, so that's how you write introductions. But no matter how brilliant your introductions are, they will not help you get a high score. Just if you're a master of writing introductions, just this skill alone will not help you. Examiner will never look at your writing and say, oh, that's a wonderful introduction. I should probably give this person a 7 or 8. Never. But if your introduction isn't done very well, then it can harm. Yeah, but what is important is the next part of a writing, that's overview. Yeah, so if you do not provide a clear overview, you limit yourself to band 5 in task achievement. Yeah, so overview is really important. Here are a couple of examples of how an overview can be written, just abstract overviews. Just have a look in the chat box. The given line graph provides data about, yeah, you can say that. Then overall, it can be seen that the amount of chicken which was consumed increased, whereas the consumption of beef, lamb, and fish decreased over the period shown. Overall, it can be seen that the proportion of the population who are aged 65 and over has increased in all the 3 countries from 1940 to present, and these proportions are expected to increase even more steeply over the next 22 years. Then overall, it can be seen that the percentage of the UK population who listen to the radio is highest in the morning, whereas TV audiences are larger in the evenings. So these are some examples of overviews from academic writing task 1 descriptions. An overview consists of 3 main elements. First, that's a linking word. Most candidates use the word overall. Yeah, you can also do that. I also do that. Or you can write in general. It's also possible. Then you can write something like it can be seen that, and there will probably be two main contrasting trends as a rule. So you will say, while something is something, something else is something else. Here it's a good idea to use a clause of concession or a contrast clause with whereas, while, whilst, although, or much as, which is an uncommon conjunction, which very few people use. And you'll stand out a little bit from the crowd if you use it. Theoretically, which is very rare, if there are two similar trends, you can say not only does something increase, but also something else increases as well. But that's really rare. Usually there is some contrast. So, but theoretically, you can also use inversion with not only, but also. Yeah. So for this middle part, actually, it's not necessary at all. You don't need to say it can be seen that. It's kind of redundant. It's kind of a redundancy. So, but you can use some nice collocation like a cursory glance at the line graph reveals that. Cursory glance is a nice collocation, reveals that's a good synonym for shows. Or you can say it becomes immediately apparent that, or it is abundantly clear that, or it is glaringly obvious, it is patently obvious, it is blindingly obvious that, or it is conspicuous that. It means it's easy to notice that, because your overview is something that is easy to notice. You can see this from the bird's eye view, especially if it's a line graph. You can see that generally something increases or generally something decreases. Yeah, and it's so how about the claim that we cannot use detailed numbers in our overview? Well, basically that's true. You're not supposed to give any numbers. But if you're talking about categories like ages, so then you can, you don't give the numbers for the population, for example, but you can give the categories of people and sometimes years if there is something really, if there is some trend that is happening over a certain period of time. But yes, definitely, you wouldn't give the numbers of the population here in the overview. Yes, in this sense, that's true. Okay, so let's have a look at an example. We've been, I hope you will like it. Many of my students like it. It's at least when I ask them, do you like it? They say yes. The graph below shows the consumption of fish and different kinds of meat in a European country between 1979 and 2004. This part is always the same in all academic writing task 1 assignments. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant, right? At least 150 words. And here is the line graph itself. Yeah, please write in the chat box if you like it or not. Do you like it or not? You can see there are a lot of fluctuations, but please remember that your task is always summarize the information. You summarize it in your overview by selecting and reporting the main features. Now, what are the main features? Do you really need to give like every number here? No, and you only have 20 minutes. It's impossible to do that. So you only select the key features and then make comparisons where relevant. So what are key features? Key features are going to, generally, that's the highest number, the highest point in the line graph, the lowest point in the line graph, the beginning of the time period and the end of the time period. So these are the key features that you need to describe. If you do not, again, your task achievement score can suffer. All right. Let's start with the introduction. So now you know how to write introductions. The graph below shows the consumption of fish and different kinds of meat in a European country between 1979 and 2004. Can you please, I'll give you, let's say 2 minutes and try to paraphrase this introduction and write it in the chat box. Okay, I'll just set the timer for 2 minutes. Okay, seems complex but interesting. Yeah, but you can simplify it. You don't have to describe every number, just the key features. All right, you still have 1.5 minutes to write your introduction. Okay, so I would write an introduction like this. Given as a line graph, which what did we say for shows? And I just want to follow the same method which I recommended you. Indicates. Okay, I'll just write indicates the way I recommended this to you. Okay, given as a line graph which indicates fish and meat consumption, or the amount of fish and different kinds of meat which were consumed. Please don't write different kinds of meat consumption. You cannot use kinds in plural as an adjective. So that's why fish and meat, just you need to put away this different kinds. Fish and meat consumption in a nation in Europe over a 25-year period commencing in 1979. Okay. Instead of fish and meat consumption, you can also write the amount of fish and different kinds of meat, or fish and meat. Which were consumed, just another way, in a nation here. So I would paraphrase it like this. Yes, about year is like over a blah, blah, blah period commencing in and the first year. All right, now, then we need to write an overview. And for the overview, you just look at this line graph and draw like a mental line from the beginning to the end. And you can see that, okay, this increased, but please don't write chicken increased. It should be the amount of chicken, or the consumption of chicken increased, or the amount of chicken which was consumed increased, but chicken did not increase. It's the amount that increased. All right, so you can see that this increased. Just you draw a mental line here and you can see. Don't worry about fluctuations at this point. We're just writing the overview. And then you can see that this beef, lamb, they also decreased, and fish also decreased. So you can say overall, a cursory glance at the line graph reveals that, or it can be seen that while, for example, the consumption of chicken increased, the consumption of beef, lamb, and fish decreased over the period being considered. Something like this. Yeah. You can also be a little bit more specific, and you can say, and in particular, while the consumption of beef and lamb increased significantly over the studied period, the consumption of fish witnessed an insignificant decline. Yeah. Okay. Right. So let's just have a look. If you want to write an overview, you can do so, or you can actually write the whole description of this chicken consumption and write it in the commentaries to this video after the live stream is over, just for the following, for the next entire next week, and I will check your writing. You don't even have to be my student for that. You can just write it, but here in the commentaries to the video, please don't send it to my email. All right, so just an example. Here's an example of an introduction and overview written by a native speaker and an IELTS examiner. It's quite a simplistic piece of writing, but we just need to see how it can be done, just the basic principle. Now, the chart provides information about fish and meat consumption in a nation in Europe over a 20-year period beginning in 1979. Yeah, almost like my introduction, but I would say not beginning, but commencing. I would say given as a line graph which provides information. Something very similar. Now, overview. Overall, it can be seen that the consumption of chicken increased while the consumption of the other three foods decreased over the period shown. Yeah, I said over the period being considered. And so in our detailed paragraphs, we need to describe key features. So that will be the highest point, the lowest point, the beginning of the graph, the end of the period, the beginning of the period, the end of the period. If that is not enough, you can also write about the second biggest number, the second smallest number as well. Okay. So as for detailed paragraphs, let's just have a look. This is 7.5 sample. Looking at the chart in more detail, it is evident that, and then you have this noun phrase, the amount of chicken which was consumed increased from 140 grams per person per week. Now you see it's measured in grams per person per week. And if you write, every time you write, you cannot write grams because it's grams per person and per week. If you write it every time, you won't have any problems reaching the 150 word limit. But yeah, to tell you the truth, examiners for the last, I think, 3 years, they stopped counting the number of words, and they just, it doesn't matter. It doesn't influence your task achievement score in task 1 or task response score in task 2. So yeah, it's better if you say something like hereinafter referred to as, and introduce an abbreviation, GPW, for example. Yeah, so hereinafter refer, or you can say, or you can also say here and after, or hereafter, here and further, you can also say, but in legal documents, and you can all definitely use it in academic writing as well, you can just write hereinafter referred to GPW in 1979 to 250 grams per person per week in 2004. In contrast, the consumption of beef decreased from 220 grams per person per week in 1979 to 100 grams per person per week in 2004. All right. Okay, let me have a look at the chat. No more messages. If you have any questions, feel free to write your questions in the chat box. I look at it from time to time. Then here's, remember, it says, and make comparisons where relevant. If you want to know how to make comparisons in academic writing task 1, please watch the second half of the live stream about static data. It was, I think, 2 weeks ago on this YouTube channel when we described water consumption. But one way to make a comparison is, for example, find the highest or the lowest point in the chart. For example, in this case, it's 250 grams per person per week in 2004. And then you put a comma and write which was the highest point covered by the graph or in the chart. This gives you extra words, which is not so significant nowadays. It also gives you a complex sentence, a relative clause with which, and it gives you a superlative, which is one of the ways to make comparisons. And it is relevant because this is the highest point, yeah, the apex, yeah, the peak. Now, turning to the remaining two data sets, it can be seen that the amount of lamb which was consumed, or you could say eaten, started at 150 grams per person per week in 1979 and shrank to approximately 60 grams per person per week in 2004. The consumption of fish showed the smallest change. It increased from about 60 grams per person per week to about 40 grams per person per week over the 25-year period. All right. Um, this is how you can approach this task, just one of the possible ways. I also want to show you another piece of writing by a native speaker that's higher level. And there it is. So the graph illustrates the amount of fish and different types of meat which were consumed in a country in Europe from 1978. Okay, yeah, that's right, 78 to 2003. Overall, cleft sentence, what stands out from the graph is that while the consumption rates of beef, lamb, and fish fell over the period, the figure for chicken rose significantly within that time. Focusing on the red meats, beef began the period as the most heavily consumed product studied, with 200 grams eaten per person per week. There was some fluctuation thereafter until 1993, after which the number dropped steadily to around 120 grams in 2003. Lambs similarly underwent a decline over the period. It's a little bit spoken. So instead of lamb, maybe it's better to say the lamb consumption, yeah, underwent, not lamb. Lamb didn't undergo a decline. It sounds a bit too spoken, but okay. Falling from 150 to about 70 grams over the quarter century. Chicken and fish, on the other hand, did not experience these significant downward trends. Although fish consumption did fall during that period, the drop was very slight, from 60 to approximately 45 grams. The amount of chicken consumed, in contrast, soared from just under 150 grams in 1978 to just below 250 grams in 2003. All right. Now, if you have any questions, it's not very clear enough, or maybe because I'm watching through my handset. Do you mean the sound is not clear enough? Well, yeah, I'm trying to do my best. I'm using a headset. Just also. So are there any questions or commentaries about what we did today? If you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat box. And also thank you all for participation and for watching. So if you wish, in the commentaries under this video for the next week, you can write the description of this chicken consumption line graph, and I will check it. I will give you my feedback. I will rewrite your report, Academic Writing Task 1 report, also in the commentaries. If you like this video, if you want more videos like this to be more live streams to happen in the future, please put thumbs up, put likes under this video to support my channel. And again, thank you all for participation.